Good morning, everyone. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a round one summary, Operation J1, version 8.1 rule set. Here we go with the summary. Well, let's head over to the Pacific first because the focus of this game is J1, or the J1 attack. And let's go over, I got my notes there, kind of what happened. While talking with Hunt Like David, I sort of just let's get into this part right away. So there is a variance, and when he does his J1, based on the rolling for French Indochina and Saigon, do they go Vichy or do they go Free French? In this case, the most important territory, Saigon, because it's worth 3, did go Vichy or did go Free French. So that means the Japanese, if they wanted that money on turn 1, they had to take it. So that meant the Japanese had to use an extra transport to go down here to capture Saigon. So that could vary what Japan does in J1. And same with French Indochina. Do they leave them? What do they do? And something else notice on the J1 is the Japanese fleet did come down here and use a sneak attack on the Dutch fleet here off of Dutch New Guinea, and also the Australian fleet off of Northern Australia. So there was 2 attacks here. They were both sneak attacks. And if you've played this game before, units that are involved in the sneak attack get to non-combat, after their movement. So they get a second additional movement. Well, this is what Hilltop does to me. And it's very effective when he does it. So the combined navies here just moved over to here off of Queensland. And what that is going to prevent, that's a pretty sizable navy, is the Australians or the New Zealanders over here from building any navy at all. So the navy that was here, it ran away, safe hiding, but anything that's built at these 2 factories is going to die right away. And that's actually very important on turn 1 or early in gameplay, because you just basically totally neuter the Australians from doing anything with building a navy. I mean, what are they going to do? Are they going to build aircraft? Are they going to build ground units now? Or are they just going to eventually, save some money, which they decided to do, and plunk some kind of navy there later on and force the Japanese to kill it? So we'll see what happens there. Now, the overall strategy, talking with Hunt Like David, is a little bit of a combined. So typically when I am, the axis and you're making your quick advances, I try to, especially when going into China, I don't like to go too far into China unless I can hold the territory. So this game of ping pong that sometimes occurs when people they take a territory and then the KMT or the CCP take it back, to me wasn't worth it. It was more worth it for Japan to take territory on turn 1 they could hold and set themselves up for a solid counterattack maneuver. So the Japanese were successful. They used their 3rd sneak attack on Manila. They also captured Hong Kong and reinforced all of their positions along the east coast of Asia with their Tokyo Express. So 2 destroyers paired together are able to non-com 1 additional infantry as a non-combat movement. So they did that 3 times. You can see the Tokyo Express marker dice. They reinforced, I think it was all of them were in, 2 of them were in Tokyo, and one was in, one actually annexed Siam. So that was pretty important there because they needed use of all 6 of their transports to stay busy. The new air transport that was in the Carolines flew over and landed in Shanghai. The purchase for the Japanese was 2 minor industrial complexes and 4 naval transports, which might have been a mistake. We'll see. Something else, every game's a little bit unique, a little bit different. So over here, the Japanese did send a one submarine, 1, 2, 3, to kill this lone Canadian transport sitting off the coast of British Columbia, and it went 3 rounds, and eventually the transport rolled a 1 in defense and killed the submarine. And in response, the transport landed uncontested in Sapporo. So That's probably not going to happen, but good for the Canadians for doing the walk-on. And why did I do that? Like, is it a waste of a transport? Because, Japan is, the Canadian transport could have remained up here for a few more turns. But what I thought was, this is what this is going to do in terms of the delaying the strategy for the Japanese, trying to delay it 1 or 2 turns. So how is Japan going to respond? It's going to cost Japan at least 1 transport and 1 turn to grab a couple guys and come up here and liberate. I mean, they can leave it, but that's just another turn. The Canadians are going to be collecting an extra 2 IPP. So depending on what Japan wants to do, but the whole strategy of now the dog pile on Japan for the Allies is to delay them 1 turn, or delay them any way possible. The British here with their lone destroyer sitting off of Calcutta came up and sank a Japanese transport. I mean, why? It's just make things as hard for Japan as possible. Anytime you have the opportunity to kill something, I think you do it. So over here, what happened in Asia, the Americans lend-lease a tank to the KMT, and the KMT dogpiled. I think they've got, see, this guy is not there. I shipped him out and I left him. So I think the KMT has 11 infantry sitting in Szechuan, with a couple cavalry, artillery, and their Flying Tiger and their AAA. So they are also read up for counterattack. The KMT did a walk-on in Shangtung, which is, that's going to die. And they also sent 2 infantry and their Flying Tiger, and they liberated French Indochina. The CCP didn't do anything other than build an infantry, and that is because the Japanese just reinforced. They reinforced, or setting themselves up for the counterattack, and all the fast movers from Korea and the units from Manchuria, well, they just went into, what is this territory here? Delane, if that's pronounced correctly, basically reinforce and set up for the Russians, who have made their hand known. I was going to delay a turn and send the Russians a turn later, but it's going to take the Russians a turn or 2 to get across. So the Russians, right now, looks like their intent, all their units in Novosibirsk, is to head in this direction and put some pressure on the Japanese. So over here, down in the South Pacific, the Japanese did gobble up a walk-on in Borneo, so they're now set up to, spread out. Another reason why I sent this destroyer here was now this sea zone is hostile. So if Japan wants to come use a naval transport and grab this infantry here, or this particular infantry from this sea zone, it can't, because there is it can as a non-com, but not as an attack. So that is also why I sent the destroyer here. So what is Japan going to do next turn is try and get as wealthy as they can by gobbling up the easy money territories, which are the money territories. So Celebes is worth 2, Java is worth 3, Sumatra is worth 4, and Dutch New Guinea's over here. So while Japan is doing this, they're also preventing the easy money grabs for the FEC and Anzac, which they typically do early in gameplay. So that is sort of a sort of a small swing in income, but it's actually, it's actually pretty significant. Over here, the Americans, they just built a destroyer in their military base in the Philippines. And this is Captain G's, that was his contribution, was suggesting that that's there, and I like it. So the Americans built a military base, built an infantry at their military base in the Philippines. Over here in South, what do you call this? The Middle East. The FEC sent their 1 transport from Calcutta, 1, 2, 3, and annexed South Iran. The British here are making a naval stand off of Cairo, and they built an air base here in Cairo and a minor IC, and they moved basically any navy that could make it into that sea zone to defend it. So now they have this scramble. So the Italians, what did the Italians do? The Italians took Greece. And they did a couple of walk-ons here. They walked into Anglo-Egypt Sudan. They walked into Alexandria. And let's talk about, I guess, the Italians also flew their entire Air Force down here to Tobruk and built a minor IC. They were able to take a walk-in Corinth, and they took Greece. Now, why do they take Corinth? Because Greece is now pro-Allied, so because they start the game pro-Allied. And they took Corinth because they want to prevent the two bombers from London from doing a landing here if this British fleet now attacks the Italian fleet off the coast of Greece. So the Italians also can fly, or so the next turn on J2 or round 2, the Germans can fly their airplanes down here and land at the air base off of Taranto for the scramble. So to protect the Italian Navy, you know, because the British could attack it next turn. Now let's talk about, which is always very interesting, and the dice in round 1 were hot and they were cold and they were unpredictable. So that is not really a good scenario. So let's talk about what happened with the Germans. So the Germans, you know, they took Warsaw and they went into West Poland first and then took Warsaw, and the dice were very hot for the Germans, very cold for the Poles. I think the Germans only suffered 2 casualties. The Germans were able to annex Hungary, Romania, and all of Finland and capture Narvik and basically all of Norway. And rolling for the French units, naval units, was also maybe a little bit different. It seemed like all the units, you know, went somewhere, and there was some naval battles that occurred. Here is a couple boats went German, and the British and the Free French sank those. It was actually the Free French grabbed a unit from Marseille and went over here and annexed Greece for the British. So lots happening there. Some major naval battles occurred here. The Germans with their submarines came up to here to Sea Zone 23 and sank the British fleet. And they also came up here to Scotland and sank the British fleet off of Scotland. And you can see the British here, this is what remaining. They responded with their navy and they survived with a Free French battleship. And all these boats you can see here were actually Vichy, and these territories just rolled Free French. And so they annexed Bordeaux, and there was a port here. So now these boats are back to Free French. So how are the Germans going to respond? Well, they've got 1 destroyer sitting off of Western Germany and a couple coastal submarines, and they still have their submarines sitting off the coast of here. The British did build a destroyer to sort of block as a blocker or whatever they can scramble, and also the Canadians built a destroyer off the coast of Canada. The Germans actually were not so hot going into Reims and going into Paris. So the Germans, you know, their dice were cold, and the French dice were, every round they would make 3 or 4 hits. And, you know, when these battles go several rounds, it's costly. So by the time the Germans got to Paris, they were into their armor, which is not great. It's not great to start losing armor if you're Germany on round 1. The Luftwaffe is all sort of centered here in Reims and in Western Germany. So Americans did not build anything over here on the Atlantic. They did rail a couple units across to Western Germany because that's where the focus is. And something else that I know Hilltop Pillbox might find this funny is the Graf Spee survived. So Graf Spee came down as a non-com and then did an attack on the South African transport off here to make sure they took that out, and then the 2 British destroyers came down, attacked it, and were not successful. And that went like 5 rounds. And then the transport that was here ran away, so it went 1, 2, and it's now hiding off of Rio de Oro. Some other notables: Syria went Free French, which that's an important territory if the Axis are going to come land some aircraft at some point. So lots happened round 1. It was a lot of fun to play. I miss playing. Reminds me the dice stress the crap out of me, even though it's a solo game. But hey, round 1, when you're doing a Japanese sneak attack with the German double pulse impact and rolling for all the French territories. It's you're just getting into it turn one, and it was a lot of fun. So thanks for watching, folks, and stay tuned for round 2.